Hi, I'm Heidi Villegas with Healing Harvest Homestead, and today I wanted to just chat with you for a moment about a question that was asked of me today in one of my groups that I go into for business, and just talk about what an herbalist is, because I didn't realize this, there's a lot of misconceptions around what an herbalist is and what an herbalist does. So we're going to talk about what is an herbalist today. The reason this came up is I was in a business meeting this morning, and I was in a little group with some strangers, and we were sharing about what we do. And I just explained that I'm an herbalist, and thinking everybody knows what that is, right? And one man said later in the meeting, he said, I had to look up what an herbalist was. He goes, I assumed that it was somebody who deals with medical marijuana. And I told him, no, that's not the case. Although some herbalists do deal with medical marijuana, I'm sure. That's rather illegal here in Idaho, so that's not something I practice, but many I'm sure do, and CBD has become huge these days. But herbalism as something a person does encompasses so much more than just CBD and medical marijuana. So what is an herbalist? Let's start first with what an herbalist is not. So an herbalist is not a medical doctor, not a nurse, not any kind of a medical professional, unless of course they've obtained that degree. Herbalists are not chiropractors, we're not naturopathic doctors. Herbalists do not promise to cure, treat, prevent, or diagnose any kind of a medical condition or illness. We're not allowed to do that. It is illegal. So if you find a person who is promising to treat, cure, diagnose, or prevent, or if they are talking in terms of they're going to heal you, it's very likely they probably don't know a lot about herbalism, or they would understand that in our country at least, we're not allowed to speak in those terms. And you'll often find herbalists speaking in kind of like, shady language. And that's because we're just not allowed to cure, treat, prevent, or diagnose. And yet herbs and plants do have medicinal actions, and they can act like drugs on the body if they're used correctly, and they can play a huge part in bringing a person's body back into a natural state of balance and health, that natural state of balance and health that God created us to have. And herbs should and could and can be, if you want, in my life, it's all we use, a big part of that process. So that is what an herbalist is not a medical doctor. Okay, so basically, again, we use plants to bring ourselves back into a state of balance or to help others do the same. I just want to talk very quickly about what a holistic herbalist is. There are different kinds of herbalists, and as you start delving into all of the herbal things, you're going to find herbalists who bring astrology and the occult into their practices. You might find New Age practices brought into their what they do. And you might find a few Christian herbalists as well, like myself, who believe that God created the plants and what a gift they are to us. And I teach my herbalism and I practice my herbalism from a very Christian perspective. But a holistic herbalist is a person, regardless of the spiritual factors, who brings a view of the entire body and the entire terrain of a human being into account to bring that person back into a state of balance. So what that means is we look at everything. If you go to see a medical doctor, what they do is they look at the symptoms and they give you a diagnosis based on the symptoms and maybe some test results if you're lucky. And then they usually prescribe some kind of a drug. An herbalist will actually sit down with a person and have them complete an intake form, a very long one in some cases, like mine's really quite long. It's 14 pages long. And they get a view of the person's self in its entirety. So what that means, and I'm going to speak from my own experience here, because I don't know how everybody else does it, but I look at a person's faith, their spirituality. I look at their emotional state, their stress levels. I look at their physical body, what's happening and what's presenting in the physical body, and mental wellness and mental health, the intellect, as well as the emotions. It all goes together. So spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, all of it. So all of that plays a role. And when I say mental and intellectual, I'm talking about self-talk, anyway, that's a whole other topic, and we can go into that later if you want me to. Just ask in the comments below if you want to hear any more about this. So you might be wondering, if you want to go see an herbalist, what about their certification? How does an herbalist get certified to practice? Well, essentially you don't. And that's a surprise to a lot of people. A lot of people believe that you can go out, get some education or take a few classes and now get a little certification, and all of a sudden you are a certified master herbalist. No. No, that's not the case at all. In our country, in America, there is absolutely no certifying board on any state level or federal level that certifies herbalists to practice. In fact, herbalists, that term is kind of a self-defined term. I like to just say, hey, if you work with herbs for your health, you are practicing herbalism. If you might see some people who might be registered with the American Herbalist Guild, basically that's a peer-reviewed organization that takes into account the numbers of hours of study, but you will find a lot of wonderful herbalists who choose not to be registered with the American Herbalist Guild because it costs a lot of time and money and they don't feel it's necessary, and guess what? It's not. Just keep that in mind. There is no such thing as becoming a certified herbalist, although you can earn certifications from schools, but you can't really call yourself a certified herbalist. There's a little caveat with that, and I will talk about that when we get to talking about essential oils, which we're going to touch on briefly in just a moment. So what do herbalists do? Well, all kinds of different things, all right? Our practices are all different, but here are some things that we might do. And here are some things I personally do as an herbalist. I grow herbs for our use for medicines and for the use in the community. I forage for medicinal herbs. I work with clients for their wellness. I work with community members for their wellness and my friends if they are interested. I write about herbalism. I teach herbalism online. I have my own online school, and I work very closely and personally with my students to be sure that they are learning the right things. Some herbalists sell products. I do not sell products. I write and I teach, and I limit it to that because I have only enough time in the day. And then herbalists generally are extremely generous and share with their communities. In fact, I get phone calls quite a lot, and I will put together a little package and take it down the road to a person who's in need, and that happens quite often. And I think that's just part of having a generous spirit. Okay, so now we've talked about what an herbalist is, what an herbalist isn't. Can you be certified or not? No. What you can say in terms of wording, because you're not a medical doctor. And we've talked a little bit about what herbalists do. And let me just show you some things. So here's a plant that I'm growing. This is a medicinal plant. It's actually a species of Tulsi or holy basil. You might be familiar with that. We create dual extractions from mushrooms that we might forage, or maybe somebody gives them to us. We create tinctures. This is rhodiola, which rhodiola was my last master class in the Confident Herbalist tribe, and it's a really interesting class. If you want to learn herbalism, you need to get into the Confident Herbalist tribe. You really do. It's amazing. I created it because I wanted to create something that doesn't exist out there and that I wished I'd had when I learned. But that's another thing for another day. We infuse oils. So this is a finished St. John's wort oil. Look how beautiful and red it is. This is actually from last summer. Our St. John's wort hasn't bloomed yet out here. And here's one that's hasn't been strained off yet. We bottle up tinctures and we label them. For our families, we just might put a label on them, but if you're selling them, you need to label correctly. And we can make salves, we can make glycerites, we can make all kinds of things, poultices and compresses and beautiful, beautiful products to help our bodies and help our minds and to help our emotions and spirits. So now let's talk about essential oils for a moment. Many of you know that I am a certified level 2 professional aromatherapist. That is a title that I earned through hundreds and hundreds of hours of study. And I'm now working on my clinical designation, which is a level 3, and it's the highest level there is. Essential oils are specialized plant products that are basically extremely powerful, and that I feel very strongly people need to have some knowledge of to use correctly, because they can be dangerous. But I view essential oil use as being a part of an herbal practice if an herbalist so chooses to do that. I'm not going to dive any more deeply into it than that, but just suffice to say that some herbalists like myself might have a very deep aromatherapy background as well, and combine that with their herbal practice, and other herbalists do not. So it just depends on the herbalist. And isn't it great that we have all this flexibility and we can choose how we want to do this? Products that you can make with essential oils include roller bottles. You can use diffuser blends to inhale the aromas. You can add them to your salves, which I do. I combine my herbal practice and my aromatic practice all the time. And I even have like essential oils in mouthwashes and rinses and tooth powders and body care products, all of it. So anyway, guys, that is what an herbalist is. An herbalist is a person who does many or all of those things, and it is a joy and a blessing and a privilege to be able to practice this craft. And I'm so glad that we live in the United States of America, where herbalists are allowed to practice, because in some developed countries, they're not. All right, that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm Heidi Villegas with Healing Harvest Homestead. If you are interested in learning herbalism with me, I hope you'll take a look at my school. I'll leave a link down below. Please subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more how-to videos and how to work with the plants and the essential oils, and maybe even a little bit about our homestead and garden. I don't dive deeply into the homestead stuff, but we are homesteaders. I love talking about the medicinal plants. It's my favorite thing in the world. I do have free gifts for you also. I'll have links down below. So if you want a free herbal remedy guide or a free book on how to relax using herbs and essential oils, I have that for you in the description below. All right. I hope you stick around. Please subscribe. I love you, and I hope to see you more here. Bye-bye.